All right, hey there, folks. Even with conventions, readings, and other author-type events back in action, I figured I'd keep bringing book tour to you. So, welcome to Russ's Rockin' Rollercoaster, Season 9, intriguing interviews with creative minds. Now, one of the genres we love here on the roller coaster is crime and mystery. So, please welcome tonight's guest, my pal and the multiple award-winning Rich ZAHRADNIK. Rich is the author of the thriller The Bone Records and 4 critically acclaimed mysteries, including Lights Out Summer, which landed him the Shamus Award, and good on you, Rich. Welcome, Rich.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Good stuff. All right. Just a heads up to the folks at home. Feel free to send me notes or questions you have for Rich in the chat box during the show, and we'll get to a few at the end. All right, Rich, as we always do, we'll start at the beginning. Where were you born? Where'd you grow up?
I was born in Poughkeepsie, New York, which has a very small crime fiction reference attached to it in The French Connection. When Popeye Doyle is smashing a drug dealer up against a fence, he keeps screaming at him, "Do you pick your feet in Poughkeepsie?" The line means nothing. He's just saying something to scare the guy. Anyway, born in Poughkeepsie, basically grew up in Dutchess County, which I call the Hudson Valley. People in the city call upstate. Right. I tell them, no, that's Syracuse or Buffalo or the Adirondacks. Right. Except for like 4 years in Colorado. My dad was an IBMer when I was a young kid. My growing up years were in Poughkeepsie and the town of Wappinger.
Okay, I know the area. I've been there. I actually did a convention up there about, oh geez, I want to say about 10 years ago.
Really?
It was Rockin, which was actually, it starts up in Rochester, and they did like a spin-off somewhere in, I don't remember where it was a long time ago. Right. And I guess it really didn't actually do so great. I don't know if they wound up doing it again, but I have some friends from Poughkeepsie. But it is funny though, you're right. I mean, I'm a born and raised New Yorker, and you know, the idea is anything north of New York City is upstate. But the reality is that when really upstate is, you know, really from half the state up, you know, once you're at Albany and north, you're pretty much there. And I actually did go to school in Buffalo, but no, the Hudson Valley is not really upstate.
Yeah, if you live on Long Island, the Bronx is upstate.
Right.
If you live in any of the other boroughs, then Yonkers is upstate. And then, you know, after that, the line slowly creeps up till you finally get to that big area that is upstate.
That's right. That's right. So was it just you? Did you have brothers, sisters?
I'm the oldest of 5. My father, like I said, was an IBMer.
So what does that mean though? What did he do at IBM?
He was an electrical engineer. He had several jobs. He worked on what they called the Big Iron, which were the mainframes. He worked on the historically classic now 360 and the 370 line. He also worked, Dutchess County in my childhood was pretty much IBM land. And then those people who had jobs at stores and stuff because IBM was there. The Poughkeepsie plant made the mainframes, and the East Fishkill plant, which is gone now, made the chips for the mainframes. And in fact, when it was at its full operation, it was the largest chip manufacturing plant in the world, bigger than anything in Silicon Valley. But because all the chips were used in-house by IBM, it didn't get noticed.
Right.
Its size. The chips being made in the valley were being sold to other companies building PCs and stuff like that.
Did any of that, electrical engineering pass down to you?
Absolutely not. I mean, no. I was an oddball, and this wouldn't be allowed today. My math and science grades were better than my English grades. My English grades weren't terrible, but I refused to allow tests or grades to tell me what I wanted to do or would do. So chose journalism. But my dad was there 37 years and I had 37 different jobs. That life, didn't have a lot of appeal to me.
Right. So what about, you're the oldest of 5. So what's the roster below you?
So my brother Tom, who's next down, is a Assembly of God pastor out in Sullivan County, New York. And then comes Julie, who's up in Utica. She's an audiologist. Mary works in the culinary food service business. She has a family in Chicago. And my youngest brother Bob is in Washington, D.C. He works for the Pew Center for City and States, which is basically a think tank.
Wow. So what's the age difference between you and your youngest
10
brother?
years between me and Bob, and roughly 2-ish between each of us when you skip down. There's one place where it's 3 and not 2, but
So you're about 10 years older than your youngest brother, thereabouts.
Mm-hmm.
So when you guys were growing up, were you close? Were you not close? Like what was that situation there?
The 10 years is you only realize this in hindsight, is when I'm 20, he's 10.
That's
or when I'm
huge.
15, he's 5. So he was kind of like, I was a big brother to his little brother. I would say, became more like friends, once he hit his 20s. Then really it doesn't matter anymore that,
Right.
maybe 10 years older, but you're sort of talking about the same things. So
I mean, I'm talking about any or all your brothers and sisters. Were you guys?
yeah, we were my brother Tom and I, there was a group in the neighborhood of boys that were within 3 or 4 years of each other. This wasn't, I'm sure, the age of the play date. We just all got together, and we all didn't get together, really age stratified. So Tom was in that group with me. So him and I did a lot of stuff together with that group. Once middle school and high school hit, he had a real interest in theater, did a lot of theater, which wasn't a thing I was doing at all. And we were in big schools, a high school with 2,000 kids. So our paths kind of diverged.
Okay. So when you were a kid, so you said, you had a lot of jobs. I had a ton of jobs, you name it. I probably did it. So what kind of jobs did you have?
Well, I meant in my career.
Oh, okay. So we'll get to that. I want to stick to.
I mean, no, I had to. We, even given the IBM engineer thing, with 5 kids, we didn't have a ton of money, so I had to work to save for college. And I was a lifeguard. I ran the snack shed at a tennis club out in the sort of the boonies of East Fishkill. It was like a one-man band thing. You did everything in this little shed, making people burgers and stuff like that. And it was an Orthodox tennis club, so I had to be very careful with the cheese and the stuff like that. And of course, I said to the owner, "You realize, I'm Catholic. I'm treif already." But I was a counselor in training, babysat. I think there's one more job in there that was summer or weekday work during high school. I just can't remember.
So what were you into as a kid? Like what was your thing?
I was a big reader. I was into comic books from the age of 10, got into Marvel at 12, which is 1972. I read my gateway drug for reading was science fiction. I read a lot of Golden Age stuff, and like Asimov and Heinlein and stuff like that. As we were talking before we came on, I got into soccer. Actually got into it early for those days. I started when I was 10, and Pele wouldn't play for the Cosmos for another 6 years. The suburban boom had not started yet, but because of that, mainly because I wasn't very good, I made the junior high school and the high school team until an injury put me out. So yeah, I played soccer, enjoyed that.
Okay.
And a lot of it, at least the younger. I mean, we had fewer. We got cars later, or we didn't get them at all. So there was a lot of riding bikes places and doing stuff and messing around.
So go back for a second. So when you were into comics, because I'm a comics guy too, although I didn't get into comics until I got to college. So I don't have that, because I know a lot of people who read comics as a kid. Sure. And it's interesting because those kids, and now as adults, they still have that, that tingle when they think about whatever they were into, right? Fantastic Four or X-Men or whatever it was.
Sure.
For you, like, what was your go-to line?
I mean, I don't think I picked up Spider-Man first, but I picked him up pretty early. And then there was a separate book they had, Marvel Team Up, where he and another Marvel character, it had a classic structure. Say the Thing was in it with him, there'd be a disagreement, they'd fight each other, and then they'd realize there was a bad guy to fight. And I just love that structure every time.
Yeah.
And when I was reading and buying when the great X-Men happened from the original team to the team, that had like Wolverine, the team that really drove X-Men during the next 20 years, probably to be the more popular book even than Spider-Man.
Right.
And I became a big fan of that. There were also minor books like Deathlock, who was a cyborg that only ran 16 issues, but I just loved.
Okay. So did you have like a group of friends who were kind of into the same things as you, or was that kind of like this was your thing you
that
did
was
off?
just me. Yeah. The reading, the comic books, reading science fiction, that was me. I mean, I had friends, but it wasn't really big for them.
Okay, so when you were reading, so you mentioned Heinlein and Asimov. Were there any like key books that you read back then that still they just kind of jump out to you today?
Oh yeah, they call them as juveniles, which I guess would be called YAs or middle grades now.
Mm.
But like Have Spacesuit Will Travel is a huge favorite, and still gives me that tingle when I think about it now.
Yep.
A little later, probably in high school, I read Foundation, the trilogy, and was just this whole galactic vision of the world just kind of got me. What else in the Heinlein line? I guess Space Cadet probably. I mean, Have Spacesuit. It just the whole thing appealed to me. He's a normal kid in a neighborhood like mine, and he gets a third-hand spacesuit, and he ends up going out into the solar system. I mean, that's the guy. I used to joke even back then. I still joke because I was small. I wasn't big. I was bullied, but I was bullied in the old way, I would say. I mean, I'm not a supporter of bullying or anything, but I don't have PTSD about it or anything like that. There were bigger guys and nastier guys and idiots around, and I had a big mouth. But I used to joke. I keep looking for a radioactive spider to sting me.
Yeah.
One to sting me, and I'll be all set.
Right. So I don't know if you did this, but as a kid, me and my friends, and I was not the ringleader, but so I grew up on Long Island. We would we would hop on the Long Island Railroad and go into Manhattan. Sorry, Mom. With none the wiser. Did you guys ever sneak into the big city back then?
I went in with permission. I was obsessed with the city, and maybe didn't get in as much as you did, because it was then an hour and 50 minutes from the station in Wappingers. But I love the city. This was more something I would be doing in high school than junior high. I would sign up for every trip to see a Broadway show and then wander off and look around at stuff myself. Had a Scientologist, Noah Mooney, try and recruit me on one of those trips. I, in my teens, went to whatever was then the New York Comic Book Convention.
Right.
It was this in the basement of a hotel.
Yep.
It had none of the flash of that giant thing at Javits.
Was it at the Pennsylvania Hotel, the one right across from Penn Station?
Yeah, probably was actually.
Yeah. Been there. Yep, been to that one. Yep. All right, so let's skip ahead just a little bit.
Sure.
You mentioned so besides writing mystery fiction, you and I have something else in common. So you were a journalist, as was I. I still work in the news business.
Sure.
So tell me about getting into journalism, because even though I've been doing media work for, I don't know, almost 30 years, I didn't go to journalism school. Everything I learned on the job.
Right.
What did you think about journalism school at the time that you went?
I mean, I would say now I know for a fact you don't need to go to journalism school, but I was obsessed with journalism. I subscribed to Columbia Journalism Review when I was still in high school, which is a really nerdy thing to do.
Right.
I just so badly wanted to go become a journalist that I wanted a journalism major. Now, luckily, I guess for me, the GW, where I went, it had a very small department that was part of the Arts and Sciences school. It wasn't a big J school by itself like they have now. So I could double major in journalism and poli-sci, which meant I had something I knew about to write about. And it being DC, this small department, there were these adjuncts that worked at the Washington Post, that worked at Nat Geo. So I got a lot of teaching from real life people. I to this day, I mean, we went out on a trip once to Maryland, and we met this guy in the journalism department out there who had a doctorate. And I just wondered, even then, why would you ever get a doctorate in journalism? Who would give one? I mean, it doesn't even make any sense. But
Right.
I tell people now, you can do it or not do it. It won't affect whether or not you get a job. It's about the writing. So if you don't do it, join the school paper, or if you're in a place that has, like I was in DC, so I could get working paid work writing, just write. You just got to keep reporting and writing, or
well, see, that's where I'll push back a little bit, and let's just go back. It's about the writing, but it's about how well you report, how well you fact check, having good sources. So let me ask you so back then, because I didn't go to journalism school. Like I said, I learned everything on the job, and believe me, every mistake that could be made as in journalism, I made, because I didn't know what I was doing. And I got my butt handed to me every day for about a year until I started to learn. What were some, even now, do you recall any teachers, any classes, or any lessons specifically from being at journalism school that they drilled into your head that even now as an adult you can say, yeah, you know what, those were good lessons?
Yeah, I mean, I've said this to people now. If I had to do it over again, I'd only take 3 of the classes in the department and then double my major in maybe poli-sci or English lit, just because I love books. Not that that would help me much in my career. But the first class was the history of the press in America, which was taught by the sort of drill sergeant professor, which even though it was not a writing class, it was in essence a history class, but understanding, where all this comes from, why even we write leads, put the most important thing in the lead, where the constitutional protections come from, but where the different, how the business evolved, why it has its ethics and its traditions and its approaches and how they've changed. I like knowing that. Now, maybe not everybody would. Reporting 101, the second class was taught by the former metropolitan editor of the Washington Star, rest in peace, the afternoon daily down there at the time, though he was already a full-time professor. And this was basically, go out and report and write stories, cover a city council meeting and come back. And you're right. I mean, it's 75% reporting, 25% writing. You gotta be listening. You gotta take good notes. If you don't know what that councilman means by some, set of letters, you got to go ask him what he's talking about. You've got to get it all. And in his class, like I got one paper back, an A over an F. It's because I had misspelled one name. And he just drilled into you that the reader, particularly if you're working in local news, which is kind of what I do now on the journalism side, but if the reader sees that you misspell someone's name, their first thought's going to be, if they can't even get the names right,
what else did they? Right.
I believe they're going to get all this complex stuff right. And then the last one, the investigative reporting class, was taught by the associate financial editor at the Post. And if the series you did was good enough, it would run in the Post real estate section. And so we did a 5-part series that did run there. So I got a Washington Post byline when I was a sophomore.
What was just I'm curious, just because I work in the real estate, that's my beat, is real estate.
Right.
So I'm just curious, what was your story?
Well, it's funny. He had done this before. And so our topic was about the most hot button topic you could pick for us as students, though we didn't really think of it that way. I mean, I was there on scholarship. We decided to do a story on the real estate policies of GW, because GW, claiming it didn't have much of a what's it called, the money that they raised from all their graduates, it had to make its money off of real estate. So it was kicking old ladies out of row houses and making Foggy Bottom go away. And the president of the university wrote a letter to everybody, like, graduates, present students, parents. You may have heard about a series in the Washington Post, and then we got the whole defense of it. And those of us that worked on the series were like, awesome, great, thank you.
All right, so let me ask you this. So by the time that you graduated from journalism school and got into the workforce, what did you think a job in journalism would be like? And did that match your reality?
Wow. I guess in part because both, not just that series, but I got hired to cover. I was hired by 2 different trade publications in DC to cover hearings on the Hill as well as regulatory agencies. So I had already learned that a lot of news, at least in DC, was about meetings, and I had already covered, the district council, so local also. So when I got to the Peekskill Evening Star and got put on a beat with 4 school boards, a county legislature, a town board, and 2 village boards, I don't know that I was that much surprised.
Okay.
I think I did that and then moved on to a bigger paper in Westchester County, and then moved into onto a trade publication, because what I don't think I fully realized was, you got to work 10 years at a small to get to a medium, and then at a medium, and I wanted to work on a big daily newspaper.
Right.
And it's the one thing I haven't achieved. And I suddenly realized, you know what? I don't want to cover planning board meetings for a decade, just to make that move. So I think that's the thing that I learned. I also, the Evening Star was owned by a company down in West Virginia. This is back in the 80s. A lot of the problems that the newspaper business have now are incredibly acute, but are of its own making in some ways, by the way the industry ran itself back when it was, monopolies in most towns. And it was a crappy newspaper, I always called it the worst afternoon daily in America. And so I was a bit shocked at, working in a place where, the people around me in the newsroom cared, but like after that, no one really cared. And I cared, and I thought everybody would.
Right, for sure. Don't I know it? One thing that I don't know if you ever touched this part of it. So after about 10 years, I switched over to public relations, and I've been doing that work in various forms for a long time. And what I realized is that after I did it for a while, I realized that had I had even some PR experience before I got into journalism, I would have been a much better journalist. Much better. The reason is that because I really learned just how much power and influence the outlets have on shaping everything that we read, hear, see, and believe.
Right.
And, when you're on the PR side, your job is to say, okay, I represent some client, whether that's an individual, a group, an organization, a company, whatever it is. And your job is to sort of convince a reporter that the story that you want them to tell is a story worth telling.
Sure.
And they have to obviously be guarded against that, because you're trying to, push your agenda. But the thing is that, and it's acute now, especially on the left, the way it really wasn't, even though we're accused about it. And I used to say this all the time. And a lot of my journalism friends, a lot of my more liberal friends, they would always get mad at me. But the truth is this: when you're the publisher, when you're the editor, you decide what is news.
Sure.
But who made you the arbiter of what is news?
Okay.
And the answer is the person who hired you. That's who said. So when you decide to write about one story, that means you're also choosing not to write about everything else.
Correct.
So there are a million stories that could be told, but you decided. And then when you tell it, you're telling it your way, which isn't the way, it's a way. And it's amazing how, and I would talk about this with my fellow reporters, editors, and nobody wanted to hear it. They all wanted to believe that they were on the side of the angels, that they were one of the good ones, but then they would write. And then if they did something was wrong, especially pre-internet, you could just hide.
Sure.
You didn't have to face the music, really. And I felt that was actually pretty irresponsible. Right? Because that way it's just like, it's sort of like the way you can attack someone online now, because you're basically anonymous. What are they going to do to you? Right? Say something mean about you back, big deal. They're not going to come to your house and kick your ass. But back then you had to look someone on the eye and say what you did. Anyway, that's just one of my little rants. So let me ask you this. So tell me about, because I've done some work with CNN, not a lot just because of the nature of my clients, but I've done quite a bit of work with Bloomberg. I still do now. These are two considerable outlets, very reputable for the most part. Tell me about what were your beats there, and what was that like? Because that's hardcore journalism. That's no joke.
Yeah, and it's kind of hard for people to imagine because of the world we live in now. On the CNN side, when I started at CNN, I was the assignment manager for the business news unit, which was put on the show. It's premier show was the Daily Show Moneyline, and the Fox and MSNBC hadn't started yet, so CNN could just go ahead and cover the news. I mean, and I take into account exactly what you're saying. It is a human business, and so, you might see a lean here, you might see a lean there. There I had never done TV before. Talk about no training.
Mhm.
I had just finished running the PR office for Turner Broadcasting when it was an independent company, and Lou Dobbs, who ran business news, liked my work in PR and didn't care that I didn't know anything about TV. So I had to learn. An assignment desk is putting reporters in the field, putting live trucks in the field, getting stuff back in, what you're covering that isn't the stuff that the anchor reads. And I had to learn all that while running it. So that was a wild ride. Bloomberg was also a wild ride. That was a mid-career move. I was in my early 40s. I thought I worked on trade publications like the Hollywood Reporter. I had done CNN Business News. I had built and run CNN's first financial news website. I was executive producer of CNNFN.com. And with all that, I thought, man, I knew business news, and Bloomberg is like boot camp. And the Bloomberg people need to think about isn't their cable channel or whatever. It's the stories that appear on the screens on Wall Street and everywhere else.
That's right. The terminal.
People pay $3,000 a month to have that screen on their desk to give them the data and the stories. And when you're working for a wire service, a financial wire that's really serving customers, not readers, like if Reuters beat us by 0.2 of a second, there'd be a meeting and we have to talk about it.
Oh, I know.
How do we get beat?
Oh God, getting scooped is the worst.
It was a great education, and my editing got better. My editing got faster. I learned parts of the business world because I had so focused on covering media that I knew nothing about. And it is, even if you go in there now, it looks like the Starship Enterprise. It's an amazing.
I love the one up on Lexington. What a great office. Yeah. Oh, it's beautiful there.
Yeah.
So were you in contact with Michael Bloomberg at all, or not really?
My stint there was when he was mayor, and so I was told you never saw, there'd be a whisper that he'd come through the office. I never saw it happen. Okay. And instead of a newsroom, it's a 3-floor newsroom, and I was on the 3rd floor with the tech team. I was on the consumer team and other teams, the headline team. The 5th floor was where the tippy top editors and some of like the markets teams were and everything.
Yep.
But I was told that what he did is he would meet with the CEO and other sort of acolytes at his townhouse to talk about the business rather than come into the place when he was mayor.
Well, I was probably in the building meeting with reporters when you were there. Didn't even know it.
Right. Ted Turner, on the other hand, I did meet
Ted Turner, wow.
when I worked in PR, mainly because Ted was a smart guy. PR reported directly to him, and he understood the importance of the media's perception of what he was doing. So we weren't buddies, but I was in a few meetings with him and got to ask him some questions. He played that hick thing really well, because in meetings the accent got tamped down.
Right.
He was a really smart, sharp guy.
He knew how to play to the room.
Oh yeah, totally.
Right.
And to the media. Right.
So tell me, what were some of the more memorable stories you worked on?
Oh my gosh. I certainly, the people, they're kind of forgotten by people now, but I was working during I was at Bloomberg during essentially the subprime crash, so there were like stories, but that didn't happen all at once. It kind of built up, and suddenly everybody realized, oh my God, we have a huge problem on our hands. And so we were covering individual companies as it hit them.
Right.
So that was my one at Bloomberg.
I remember exactly where I was when the Lehman story broke. I was in the office working on a real estate publication, and the news came in, and we were like, oh God, this is not going to be good.
Exactly. It sounds a little, soft-seated, but I covered the Cannes Film Festival and the Berlin Film Festival.
Oh, cool.
The Cannes Film Festival is an amazing thing to witness and to watch on kind of all levels. I always say when I'm asked this, and you know, I've worked at a lot of places, but like I was out of work and a consultant helping build websites for other media companies. For example, when 9/11 happened, you know, so the obvious one on a lot of people's lists that are my age or your age might be that one. And I always say the best story that I ever did was the one I never wrote, or it was early in my media reporting career. I went out to the critics tour, which is when all the networks show off their show to the TV critics, and the trade press shows up to see if they can get any nuggets of business information. And I was with this third-rate trade publication, and the HBO CEO was a dinner, and of course the Journal and the Times are sitting next to him, and this PR woman comes up to me and says, "Yeah, I have somewhere for you to sit," with a bit of a look on her face. And it's a table way at the back. She sits me down next to Ray Bradbury, who he had an anthology series coming out with HBO. And I spent a 5-hour dinner talking to Ray Bradbury.
Oh, wow.
Nothing in that conversation I could use for the publication Communications Daily. And I didn't even care. I did an hour of fanboy slobbering. And after I got over that, I asked him questions and we talked, and it's kind of my best non-story story ever.
Wow. So tell me about that. What was that like?
I mean, it was nice. He was gracious. You know, we each were drinking white wine, but not, you know, we were gurgling bottles at a time. You know, I know Fahrenheit 451 is one of my favorite books, so I know that came up. And I'm not a huge short story reader, and of course he's one of the greatest in science fiction history. I had more read his novels, but you know, I was asking about F451 and you know, the possibility of a remake for the movie because the rights were available, and you know, just all kinds of different things.
Oh, cool. So that's the perfect transition. So we've talked about a lot of other stuff. So tell me when you first got serious about writing fiction.
So if you go way back, when I was 15, I decided I was going to be a fiction writer. And as I say, be afraid of what, you know, someone who's 15 3/4 years old will decide. And when I hit about 9 months later, I decided I wasn't going to be, because I wasn't talented enough. No one had told me, not an English teacher. I hadn't taken a standardized test in fiction writing or anything. I just decided. And somewhere within that same period, I had a letter to the editor published in a local paper about a school board member. My name was on it. People were talking about it, and it became journalism for me. So you got to fast forward to about, I was 31 working in London for the Hollywood Reporter, and the ideas still kept popping into my head. So I started writing while I was working. And it took obviously a long time, a lot of manuscripts that should never be read by anybody. And, you know, a lot of it doing full-time jobs, some jobs like Bloomberg and CNNFN.com, where I was working 12, 14-hour days. There wasn't a lot of writing getting done. But I finally, you know, got the idea and got the first book in my first series done called Last Words, got an agent, got to deal with a small publisher for 4 books, so 3 more books. And that happened back in 2013.
Okay. So you focus on mysteries and thrillers.
Right.
Why?
Oh, and this is embarrassing. I don't really believe this now, but I like I said, I started reading science fiction. I have ideas in my file, my Scrivener file, for science fiction novels. I somehow in my brain, my 30-year-old brain, thought that, you know, crime writing, you know, would be a bit more impressive. I don't think that now. But I at the same time, you know, that anecdote is not all of it. As much as I love reading, you know, science fiction, including keeping up with it, I loved reading crime and was reading a lot of crime in my late 20s, early 30s, both the classics as well as more current stuff. So I didn't just glom onto something I had never read or never done before. I was reading both.
Okay, so a quick interlude for those came in a little late. If you have any questions or comments for Rich, send them in the chat box, and we'll get to a few at the end. All right. So we just spent a little bit of time about being a journalist. So as a journalist, it helps to have a curious mind. You need a desire to understand not just what happened, but why and the context of the scene. Do you find that the skills and experiences you developed as a journalist have helped you at all with your fiction?
Yeah, I think, and as you know, there are a lot of novel writers that didn't come out of journalism, so it's not a requirement. I don't know how an incurious person could write fiction, because whatever you write, even if it's right now in the present day, it's going to be about not just maybe a character that's modeled on you for, to take the most extreme, but there's going to be other characters and things are going to happen, and you're going to have to find out how things work and why they work, and get your head around, how to describe emotion and all that other kind of stuff. So I think that part of journalism, the curiosity, right? An incurious journalist I don't understand how that works either. Is critical for me. What I had to get out of the way of when I started was my first attempt at a manuscript was what I would say too journalistic. I was too worried about it being factually accurate.
Right.
But let's face it, if you're writing about, New York City, you're not going to say that, a street goes the wrong way or whatever like that, but you're writing fiction. So, things have to happen that surprise and interest people. And I stuck, so it was a novel involving a journalist, stuck so closely to kind of what the way the real world worked. It wasn't interesting enough. It wasn't exciting enough. So, so it's the danger of when they say write what you know. Wow. It's like, write what you know, but bring your curiosity and your imagination along.
Absolutely. So as an author, is your intent simply to entertain, or are you trying to say something about the human condition, or both?
I mean, I would say the 15-year-old, wanted, and then the 30-year-old wanted to do the same thing. When I was a little kid, I was fascinated by the fact that, black letters on white paper were putting movies in my head. And I just thought that was an incredible power to be able to have. Because as you know, when you're reading, eventually you get lost and you're not seeing the words and it's playing out in your head. And I wanted to put movies into people's heads. So I would say I am first and foremost an entertainer. Because I have things I care about, I find that without even trying, like saying I need this theme or whatever, they end up in my stories and people see them and notice them, rather than sort of setting out with a message in mind.
Okay. Because I mean, I know when I write, especially now, I always have themes that I just kind of want to tackle in one form or another, but for you, it's just more instinctive. You just
I think they get there. I mean, the most obvious one that sort of goes along with the way you handle it is what the manuscript that I started in the fall that I'm working on now. It's called Ghost Paper, and it deals with a reporter at a newspaper that's going to die. He thinks it's being murdered. And there are, because readers don't want just dead newspapers, they want dead people. There are people getting murdered in this, but in essence, I'm dealing with the collapse of local news in America. 2,500 newspapers since 2004. But if you wrote a book about all of them, that would be boring. That's not interesting. Like I can drop those little factoids in, and I will. But by telling this one story of this one paper and this one guy, I'm starting out. There are definitely themes in my books. They just come in sort of the back way, the first four, the way New York was so messed up in the 70s. You read about race, you read about the financial shenanigans that almost brought New York City to collapse, that are exactly the duplicate of what happened in the subprime. Just subprime was national. So I guess probably this is the first time where I've been more overt in knowing what it is I wanted.
Right. Okay. So let me ask you this. Are you more interested in story, character, or is it both?
I'd like to say character, but if I have any strength, it's in story, and I have to work really hard on on character, creating great individualized characters that are interesting and felt by the reader is I mean, there's some writers that they feel they're called character driven. They're character driven writers. I am definitely story driven, but well aware that, just a roller coaster with nobody, in the seats, no people around is just gonna be boring.
That's right, for sure. All right, that was great, but now it's a time for a special segment where we spin the wheel. On the wheel are 7 possible categories. Wherever it lands is what you get, and the categories are: Play It Again, Sam, Stranger in a Strange Land, Cold Case, Music Lover, Quantum Leap, Desperately Dreaming, Dexter, and everyone's new favorite, Kick 'Em in the Junk. All right, you ready? Here we go. Here we go, round and round. No whammies. Let's see what we got for you. And you got Music. Wow, this one always comes up. I don't know why. All right. Yeah. What is one song or piece of music that you can listen to no matter how many times you hear it?
Thunder Road by Bruce Springsteen.
Thunder Road. Okay, the boss. Always a good one. All right, fair enough. All right, so now I've got, now we're going to pick your poison. I got 4 options for you. I got A, B, C, and D.
Okay.
Pick.
Oh, B.
B. All right, so this is Old Dog, New Tricks. All right, and this one is, what do we got here? Sorry. It is. So the saying goes that you can't teach an old dog new tricks, yet every writer I know, including myself, has made numerous mistakes along the way in their fiction careers. Sure. What's one mistake that you made that hurt like hell at the time, but you learned from and endeavored not to make that mistake again?
Oh, wow. There are so many good ones to pick from.
Yeah.
I mean, I already mentioned the first manuscript where, I thought I was this great journalist, and so I could just sit there and journalist my way through a novel. And so, that got an agent and 8 rejections. So that was a lot of pain. I got in the Bone Records, which is the book that's out now, and it's set in Coney Island. I love Coney Island. Been there dozens and dozens of times, but I still dove deep into the research, so deep that when the first editor looked at it, he said, yeah, too much. I had to cut 12,000 words out of 82 to 70. That was kind of painful. And I'll just add a quickie because it's current. I started the Ghost paper, and I've always written in third person, and I'm 10,000 words in, and I said to myself, you know what? I really think this needs to be first person, even though I don't have that experience. I have the 4 books, so here's a new trick. I don't have the experience. The 5 books I've written are in third, so going through 10,000 words and first personing them is not just a search and replace activity.
No, not at all. You have to have a real
voice. You're changing the voice and everything.
That's exactly right. Wow. Because I've done both. I've written in third and first, and my new series has all been first person. So I've been in that head. It's great because you really crawl in the skin of the character, but that character must be on every single page through the whole novel. So, all right, give me another one. So you got A, C, or D. Oh, actually, no, stop. Hold on, real quick. Go back. You said something real interesting. So you had all this intense detail about Coney Island. You had to cut 12,000 words is no joke. I mean, that's a big short story that you cut out of there. Yep. So what was the takeaway for you? If there was one.
Don't love something so much. I don't know. I thought I was, the thing that people said they liked about my first 4 books, or a thing they said they liked, was they really, and they're not long. My books are over 65,000 or 280 pages long, 300 pages max. They really felt they got to know New York in the 70s, a place that a lot of people have forgotten what it looks like. And so I this idea of location or descriptive as character is important to me. So I kind of tried to amp it way up with the Bone Records and just kind of lost my way.
Right. So just a little. I'm reading a book right now. Someone asked me to read it, and it's very good. And the descriptive writing is just A++.
Yep.
But there's a lot of it. And I feel like sometimes it's just, you've given me enough. Now I kind of want you to get to it.
Yep.
At a certain point, I don't need you to describe every mailbox on every corner. I get it. Right. All right. Fair enough. All right. So
As,
you got,
as Elmore Leonard said in his tips to writers, leave out the parts that people skip over.
that's
And
right.
that's what I'm always thinking. I want to give you a picture in your mind, but I don't want to give you a giant block of description that you want to skip.
That's
So
right.
what's going to make that work?
Good. All right. Good on you. All right. So you got, give me A, C, or D.
D.
I'm sorry, D?
D.
D. All right. All right. We're going to go to our advice column. Okay.
Uh-oh.
What's the best and worst writing advice you've ever been given?
Okay, the best advice I was given was back in high school. There was a lot of people have that one teacher. I had an English teacher who, even though I had one class with him in 4 years, I would talk to him every day. And so when I got on this writing thing, I got him aside. I said, look, and I knew, he knew everything and all this. I'm like, I want to be a writer. What's the secret? How do I get there? And he said, you want to be a writer? I said, yeah. What? Tell me, you sure you want to be a writer? I said, yeah. What should I do? Write 1,000 words a day. I said, no, come on. What's the secret magic? He said, write 1,000 words a day. And he was absolutely right. I mean, it can be 500 or it can be 2,000. It's whoever you are. But write 1,000 words a day. The worst writing advice I ever got. Wow. The worst writing. I mean, I can't say it's write what you know because there is ways that works. You just have to dial it down. And I will say, I saw a great masterclass once by Lee Childs, who writes Jack Reacher, who semi-facetiously, his entire theme was instead of show don't tell, tell don't show. And he gave all these examples about how telling makes more sense than showing because these cliches get thrown at you in writing. So I can't think of an excellent one.
All right. Well, fair enough. We got more stuff for you. So give me.
If I do, I will definitely, because I'm sure
right.
there was.
You got A or C?
A.
All right. We're going to find out if you've got thick skin.
Okay.
As writers, when we put our work and therefore ourselves out there, criticism of all kind comes with it. The good, the bad, and everything in between.
Sure.
So how do you feel about reviews? I mean, honestly, do you take them to heart? Do you let them roll off you? Or do some stick with you more than others?
I honestly think I think they roll off me. I mean, I might chew on, a slam and a review where they, to me, misread what they were seeing for a few hours, but then I just let it go. I think this is definitely, and I didn't include it in the list, but this is definitely an area where journalism helps you as a writer.
Yep.
Starting at the editing process. I've seen so many people come into fiction writing and get flipped over backwards by one critique in a writer's group or whatever. And in journalism, like if the city editor says X, do X or it's not running in the paper. Like Get it done, take it out, fix it. And then I was taught in a great fiction writing class, like, the person would say, but what I'm trying to do, and the teacher would interrupt and say, look, you can't sit next to every reader and explain it to them. If this reader is telling you they're not getting it, they're not getting it. Yeah.
Fair enough. Okay. So last one. All right. This one, there's a bit of a wind up on this one. So bear with me.
Okay.
All right. So it's all or nothing or steady she goes. All right. Okay. It's one of the newer ones. So I'm going to give you two options that are going to define the rest of your fiction career. And you can only pick one. Okay. And here are the two options. Option one, your next book is an international bestseller. You win every award there is. You make tons of money. Your book gets made into a movie that wins the Academy Award for Best Picture. You can ride this success forever. You will always be that writer. However, every book you write after that one, I'm talking every single one, is an absolute dumpster fire. Critically trashed and a commercial zero. You are called a washed up hack who could no longer even string together two cohesive sentences. Okay. Or you can just keep writing as you've been doing. Yep. You're generally well respected. Whatever money comes, it does, it doesn't. And that's what there is. So if it were up to you, given those two very specific choices, which career path do you pick? All or nothing or steady as she goes?
Steady she goes.
Steady she goes. All right, fair enough. All right.
I have this. It's an odd fear. It's not one that where I collapse on the sidewalk. But when I only buy Mega Millions when it's like a huge, huge number. But then I had this little worry, like, God, if I win and then could self-publish myself from here to China, would I really be a good writer at that point? Like, what happens then? So do I really want to win it? So I have kind of thought about that idea sideways.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so now I'm going to give you some truth serum. All right, I'm going to ask you 10 questions. Answer quickly. You ready?
Okay.
All right. Favorite flavor ice cream?
Coffee.
What's one food you will never eat ever for any reason?
Cauliflower.
Okay. Oh, bucket list destination anywhere in the world.
China.
Scariest movie you ever saw?
I know I have to do this quickly, but there's a reason it's so old. I can't watch horror movies. Horror TV shows I hide behind the couch. So the last scariest movie I ever saw was the original Alien.
Oh, well, that was scary as hell.
Because I thought I was going to a science fiction movie. I didn't know it was a haunted house in space.
Right.
And I hid behind a baseball cap for about half the movie. My friends laughed at me the whole time.
I'm right there with you. I'm a big scaredy cat. All right. Do you play any musical instruments? And if not, which one if you could?
I do not. I'd love to play the guitar.
Guitar. Okay, fair enough. Me too. All right. Cats or dogs?
Dog.
Favorite cocktail?
Vodka martini up.
Okay. You can see a live performance, sports, theater, whatever, any seat, any venue, any point in history. What's your choice?
I'd like to have a center line seat at the final of the next World Cup, which will be here in the US.
All right, right on. Okay. All right. If you can get even just one more season of any TV show that you thought was canceled too soon, what would it be?
Oh, God. Wow, that's really hard. I love it. I can't repeat watch many things, and if I can repeat watch it, I love a series called Halt and Catch Fire.
Yes.
But the thing is, they ended that thing so well that I don't know how they would do a fifth season.
The funny thing is, I was actually, when you mentioned that your dad was at IBM, I was actually going to ask you if you had seen that show.
I had. Oh my God, it was because from the IBM stuff all the way through, I was, it's early web, but I was in the middle of the search engine wars. They wanted our content from CNN. I was at a press conference on the table with Mark Andreessen, me and him, announcing the CNFN deal with Netscape. So it was like watching what I lived through, because I love tech.
Right.
I didn't want to be an electrical engineer, but I love playing with computers and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know. Yeah. Oh, gosh, or maybe, what would they have done if they had gotten a fourth season of the original Star Trek?
Okay, well, fair enough. All right, so we're going to take some questions from the audience. We got one here for you. So how did you find out? The question is, how did you find out about the Bone records? It was so interesting to learn about them, and they made a good metaphor for the shadows of the past that make their presence known.
Well, thank you. That is a really good question, because I mean, I know Russ, I'm sure you and the authors that I meet at conferences, books have different books have different starts, which is an obvious statement. But I know some writers who see the last scene and that gets them going.
Right.
My first book was a what if, about a character, something happening to him, and that was the beginning of it. I read an article about the Bone records. I think it was in the Guardian, and I was fascinated by them because I love music. I can't sing or anything, but I love music. I'm fascinated by it. And I'm like, these are so cool. I've never heard about these before.
So what are Bone records?
Okay, yeah. So we should tell the audience. Bone records. Here's an example of one. And now that you've seen one, from the late 40s until 1963 in the Soviet Union, the only way to listen to banned American rock and roll was on bootleg singles made from used X-rays. So they were called Bones or Bone Records or Rock on the Rim.
Okay.
And they lasted that discrete period of time, and then we're gone. So I start researching. There's only one hardcover book. Can't pull it off my shelf easily. There's only one nonfiction book written about them. There are some other newspaper magazine articles, and I'm like, okay, this is the first time I'm writing a book where I'm using what Hitchcock called a MacGuffin.
Right.
The object is the beginning of the book, but that, of course, meant I had to find out, okay, who's going to be my central character? Where would it be that these bone records would appear rationally and reasonably? I picked Little Odessa in Russia because Russian immigrants would be of an age where they would know about them, and it went on from there.
All right, we got one more question, and then we're gonna move on. Have you needed to get information from any police departments for your stories? Any techniques that worked?
I have not. I am not Michael Connolly, who spent 20 years as a police reporter for the LA Times, but at the Evening Star, at a newspaper I owned early in my career called the Peekskill, I co-owned, called the Peekskill Herald, and in other jobs, I had to do cop stuff, which has pretty much given me enough information to do what I do. Now, my character is a reporter and now a 28-year-old kid who's employed in an arcade and for the city of New York in a sort of bureaucratic job. I don't write police procedurals. Those are the ones, to me, where you need to know everything about how the police work because the readers of them expect you to. Right. My people are outsiders who can, if they don't know, my reporter can ask a question. Right. So there is something called, you should Google this, the Writers Police Academy. One of Russ's previous guests, Bruce
Coffin.
Yeah, Bruce Coffin, I shouldn't space it. He's a good friend. A former detective sergeant is teaching it at it. There are always panels at writers' conventions about this, but this is one where all they do is cop stuff for writers. Cool. It costs money, obviously, but there's, All
right, good stuff. All right, I'm going to share my screen for a minute, and then we're going to call it a night. So hang on, give me one second. All right.
You're right, it did fly by.
I told you. All right. So you talked a little bit about the bone record. So what? Yep. So we know what a bone record is now, but what's your novel about?
Right. I'm glad because I don't have to do the definition part. So this isn't giving anything away. This is pretty much starts in the first chapter. Grigory Orlov, Grig is what he's called, 28-year-old, has been looking for his father for 6 months. He returns in the first chapter only to be murdered by a gunman who breaks into their house. Grig recovers from a pocket in his father's jacket a bone record. At this point, Greg, being 28, doesn't know what it is. He thinks he has a circular X-ray. Then he figures out it's got grooves in it. Then he plays it, and then, from the internet, you can figure it out. And Greg is trying to figure out who killed his dad because the police aren't particularly interested for reasons that become clearer and clearer. And it starts to turn out that the bone records are a signal that you're next. And so not only is he trying to solve his father's murder, but he's trying to keep himself and the people that he loves alive.
That is cool as hell. Like I can't wait to read this. And I'm just noticing it right now, right here.
Right. You saw
I didn't notice that before.
You saw the Easter egg. So almost every bone record, if you go to X-Ray Audio, you can see real ones and hear real ones, has what their the song is written on it. It's usually handwritten. And I should say this, just a little bit of trivia. The hole was usually burnt by a cigarette. The guy would just poke his cigarette through it to burn the hole. But that Russian stands for Rave On, because there are 2 bone records in the book that have Buddy Holly songs.
Buddy Holly, that's right.
Not Fade Away, not Fade Away, and Rave On.
That's right. Oh,
not Fade Away being, I thought, a good song for a murder mystery.
Me too. Right on. All right, we're gonna have to. We have lots to discuss when this is over. All right. Okay. All right, Rich, that was great, and the bone records is next on my list, 100%.
Thank you.
All right. All right, so as for me, if you're up for a little twist with your pulpy private eye fiction, I'll encourage you to check out Crackle and Fire. It's the first novel in my ongoing sci-fi noir series featuring hard-boiled private detective Angela Hardwick, who in my mind is part Blade Runner, part Doctor Who, a part Atomic Blonde. In Crackle and Fire, Hardwick is approached by a young accounting executive who wants Hardwick to track down a missing intern who's absconded with some highly sensitive files. Hardwick is about to take the case only when the executive says that the files are linked to a low-level but highly dangerous crime family. She opts out. but for reasons I will not explain here, there's a personal connection for Hardwick in the case that she simply just can't ignore and pretty much has no choice but to take the case. The investigation leads her to an Occupy Wall Street type of movement, dueling gangsters, and a serial killer with galactic ambitions of his own. This is actually Hardwick's first novel, and in addition to the core mystery, Hardwick's 5-year-old son, Owen, is missing. And if a private eye like Hardwick can't find him, you know it's a problem. She struggles intensely to deal with that, and some of the choices that she makes as a result define who she's going to be going forward. There's 2 other novels in the series so far, and right now I'm editing book 4, which will be out in September. As for Crackle and Fire, it's available on Amazon and published by Crazy 8 Press. Okay, folks, that's our show. I want to thank Rich for coming on and talking to us, and I want to thank everyone who's been watching at home. It was great to have everybody here. Rich, you're welcome to come back anytime, and I'll see you guys all next week. All right,
Russ,
take care.
Thanks for having me. This was great.
All right, thanks a lot, guys. See you soon. Bye now.